Zohran Mamdani, New York City's Democratic Socialist mayor, facing questions from reporters just a short time ago after admitting, he says they put all their legal teams on this to figure out something that I think most people knew already. He does not have the authority to pull off one of the biggest issues that he campaigned on. Watch.
Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, the architect of a horrific genocide against the Palestinian people. My administration has reviewed every avenue available under applicable law to determine whether New York City could execute the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant if Benjamin Netanyahu came here. It is clear that we do not have the independent legal authority to enforce this warrant. The federal government, however, does, and I call on them to join the ICC and execute this warrant.
Interesting, right? So keep in mind that outside of Israel, New York City has the largest Jewish population of any city in the world, the city where he is mayor. Constitutional attorney Jonathan Turley is here with a look at the ICC, the mayor's power when it comes to issues that come out of the ICC, which the United States does not recognize. We're party to the basic treaty that founded it, but not to its findings and jurisdiction. So we're going to speak with him in just a moment. But first, to correspondent CB Cotton covering the mayor's story here in New York City. Hi, CB.
Hey, Martha. So today, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani doubling down on his social media video where he said while the city has no power to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the federal government, he believes, does and should. And he insisted that his criticism isn't just for the Israeli leader. Listen.
I want to make it very clear that that welcome ends with me. I will not be welcoming Benjamin Netanyahu or any other war criminals when they come to this city.
Today, Mamdani facing repeated questions about his 2-minute social media video where he suggested the U.S. government should step up and arrest Netanyahu over a 2024 International Criminal Court warrant, which accused the Israeli leader of war crimes in Gaza. The mayor said he was defending humanity and dignity of all people, but a Jewish human rights organization, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, pointing out that Mamdani's video, quote, made no mention of Hamas or the October 7th massacre of innocent civilians. Netanyahu responded earlier this week to Mamdani, who had similar critique of Israel during an interview with the New York Times. Netanyahu defended Israel's wartime actions and dismissed the International Criminal Court as a, quote, kangaroo court. And Israeli Ambassador Danny Danon also sounding off, writing in part on X, Zohran Mamdani, enough. You were elected to serve New Yorkers, not Hamas propaganda. Do your job. Today, in response to criticism, Mamdani said he does consider October 7th a, quote, war crime. President Trump, Martha, has already shut down the idea of Netanyahu's arrest, posting to Truth Social on Monday that the Israeli leader would not be arrested in, quote, any way, shape or form while in the U.S. Martha.
CB, thank you very much. With that, we bring in Jonathan Turley, constitutional attorney, George Washington University law professor, and Fox News contributor. Jonathan, great to have you with us. I had to sort of almost laugh when I heard him say, the mayor of New York say that, he had exhausted all of the research to figure out whether or not he had the authority to arrest a foreign leader who is here at the UN. What's your take on all this, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'd love to have been in the room when someone explained you're not president of the United States. It's like watching some kid play dress up in the oversized clothing of his parents. I mean, he's the mayor of a city, and he doesn't have the authority to go around arresting international figures, let alone heads of state. But this is really part of the sort of politics by layaway. He campaigned on arresting Netanyahu and giving free stuff like free buses. And when he becomes mayor, he finds out that, wow, I just can't, deliver on those promises. The ICC has long been controversial. It's long been at odds with the U.S. government. But whatever the merits of that debate, the mayor of New York is completely irrelevant to it. And I also don't think Netanyahu was expecting a big welcome from Mamdani. So I'm not too sure this would be a crushing revelation that Mamdani is not going to be happy.
It's interesting, the people that he doesn't condemn. And I think the argument is quite valid on the part of those who say, look, can you please just focus on running New York, fixing the potholes, cleaning up what's going on the West Side Highway? These are jobs. It's an administrative job, really, to be mayor of New York. It's running the city. But he's spending a lot of time on this. So it does beg the question why he would not condemn Hamas, whose leaders at any given moment during the war with Israel could have returned the hostages and ended things, to, in a move to protect the people of Gaza. They never did that. Here's the mayor when he was running for office, Jonathan, when I asked him if he thought Hamas should lay down their arms, which was a pretty, widely held belief at that point. Watch. Do you believe that Hamas should lay down their weapons and leave the leadership in Gaza?
I believe that any future here in New York City is one that we have to make sure that's affordable for all. And as it pertains to Israel and Palestine, that we have to ensure that there's peace. And that is the future that we have to fight for.
But you won't say that Hamas should lay down their arms and give up leadership in Gaza.
I don't really have opinions about the future of Hamas and Israel beyond the question of justice and safety and the fact that anything has to abide by international law. And that applies to Hamas, that applies to the Israeli military, applies to anyone you could ask me about.
Apparently now he has a lot of opinions about Israel, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with saying that you are the voice of a universal morality is that you're awfully selective in who you condemn with that voice. I mean, you had an attack on Israel in which women were raped, innocent people murdered, children killed, people kidnapped, and then held for months and months in deplorable conditions. He seems to be almost, reluctant at every turn to even address that question. But he seems eager to condemn Israel and Netanyahu. So this is part of what we've seen coming from him. The real shame is that he's representing a city with the largest population of Jewish citizens in the United States. And he really is not representing their interests by only condemning one side of this controversy and ignoring that Israel was responding to a horrific massacre that Hamas carried out on its soil.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if President Pezeshkian comes to New York and whether or not Mayor Mamdani would want to arrest him. He does not face charges in front of the ICC because Iran is not party to that agreement, and probably for good reason, because they don't want to be hauled before that court in any way, shape, or form. But there's long been people who have been very upset when the Iranian leadership, given their record, comes to New York for the UN, Jonathan.
That's right, and Iran has a record that is just dripping with the gore and blood of its own people, and it's still carrying out those attacks, including attacks on the Strait of Hormuz on commercial shipping. None of that seems to move the mayor to raise condemnations or concerns, but perhaps this will get him to return to those free buses and other free things that he promised during the campaign.
And and the huge homeless shelter, the huge homeless encampment that's all up and down the West Side Highway right now near the Intrepid, where people are trying to come for summer trips this summer. So, Jonathan, always great to see you. Thank you very much, Jonathan Turley.
Thank you, Martha. Thanks.
Thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.